According to Testosterone Dreams published in 2004, Dr. Robert Kerr, a California physician who talked openly about administering steroids to several thousand athletes, bodybuilders, and policemen during the 1970s and 1980s, stated, "Anabolic steroids will never be viewed by the public and athletic officials as anything but a hazard to the athlete's health until the drugs are strictly controlled by physicians. Only with adequate, safe controls can anabolic steroids be viewed in the same light as antibiotics, anti-asthmatics, and other medications used in daily life." Medically supervised doping was already a part of professional cycling by the 1950s. Certainly, if approached scientifically, Russell Mockridge, an Australian amateur cyclist, wrote, "With the aid of doctors specializing in their use, steroids can be used and is being used by leading European champions several times a year." Weising from Sports Medicine asserts that all competitive athletes have to make adjustments in many areas of their lives if they want to be successful in their given sports. Thus, the athlete has the liberty to act, but in the knowledge that his or her actions will have certain consequences. If the athlete were to forego certain performance-enhancing behavior, he or she would be less successful. If one allows the use of performance-enhancing drug within certain boundaries, then all athletes who wish to be successful would have no choice but to use the substances that are allowed by the rules. They would have free choice under pressure in this respect. Thomas Murray from the Hastings Center report declares that those who see performance-enhancing drugs used as the exercise of individual liberty are unmoved by the prospect of some harm. They believe it should be up to the individual, who is assumed to be a rational, autonomous, and uncoerced agent, to weigh probable harms against benefits, and choose according to his or her own value preferences. It would be a much greater wrong, they would say, to deny the people the right to make their own choices. In 1969, a 5-time Tour de France champion, Jacques Anquetil, stated, "I dope myself. Everyone dopes himself. Those who claim they don't are liars." For 50 years, bike racers have been taking stimulants. Obviously, we can do without them in a race, but then we will pedal 15 miles an hour instead of 25. Since we are constantly asked to go faster and to make even greater efforts, we have no choice but to take stimulants. Solberg and Ringer state that research in sports has clearly suggested that the values and norms embedded in the cultures of competitive sports often differ from commonly held social norms about sportsmanship and fair play. Sports, it is argued, operates in a way that allows participants to set aside normal societal restraints and create an environment that allows for the transgression of behavioral norms. In particular, the culture of highly competitive sports environments, including professional sports, is characterized by values that strongly prioritize winning over fair play. Weising suggests that a legalization of performance-enhancing drugs in competitive sports, the athletes would definitely take more risk, although given the limits in medical supervision, the risk would be considered acceptable. Dr. Norman Faust, a professor of bioethics at the University of Wisconsin, adds that the message that legalization of performance-enhancing drugs would send to children is no different than one sent by two regulated vices, alcohol and tobacco. The difference is that smoking kills 400,000 people a year, almost all of whom become addicted in adolescence, and drinking kills tens of thousands, many of them children. Deaths attributable to steroids are extraordinarily rare. Foss said legalization would also allow the drugs to be manufactured in FDA-regulated facilities, so athletes could be more confident about dosing, purity, contamination, and other safety issues. The present system drives them to obtain drugs from manufacturers who have no oversight, increasing the risk of harm. As athletic professionals who always want to be better at what they do, they will constantly find ways to improve their performance, and not all methods will necessarily involve drugs. Take the swimsuit Michael Phelps wore to win his Olympic gold in the 2012 Summer Olympics. Speedo's development team, partnering with NASA's scientists, created the Laser Racer that is simply down to its effectiveness in reducing drag through the water with features such as its low friction, ultrasonically welded panels instead of sewn seams. That isn't a drug, but it can count as a performance enhancer. And since it's unnatural, should that be banned from professional sports as well? Savulescu, Foddy, and Clayton state that the welfare of the athlete must be our primary concern. If a drug does not dispose an athlete to excessive risk, we should allow it even if it enhances performance. Weissing argues that it is improbable that all athletes will respond to doping options in the same way, because different measures would probably be used, and athletes respond differently to performance-enhancing drugs. The use of different doping measures is possible when there is flexibility in prescription and enforcement of permissible doping practices. In such circumstances, athletes will strive with the help of their physicians to identify and use the best method for enhancing performance within the permitted limits. This would extend competition among athletes beyond the actual event into the realm of who could find the best doping methods. Savulescu, Fadi, and Clayton attest that performance enhancement is not against the spirit of the sport, it is the spirit of the sport. To choose to be better is to be human. Athletes should be given this choice. Their welfare should be paramount, but taking drugs is not necessarily cheating. The legalizations in sport may be fairer and safer. Far from being against the spirit of sport, biological manipulation embodies the human spirit, the capacity to improve ourselves on the basis of our reason. We do what only humans do. The result will be that the winner is not the person who was born with the best genetic potential to be strongest. Sport would be less of a genetic lottery. The winner will be the person with a combination of the genetic potential, training, psychology, and judgment. Professional athletes should have the right to decide whether or not to use performing enhancement drugs, since they are the ones putting their own bodies at risk. Alcohol is a legalized substance that the world chooses whether or not to abuse, and alcoholism poses more of a threat to society than performing enhancement drugs do. At least with athletes, they would know that they are risking their own body and health in order to do their best at their profession. For people who choose to abuse alcohol, they don't consider the risks that are not only inflicted on their bodies, but to the people around them as well. If people are allowed to choose to recklessly drink alcohol, then professional athletes should have the right to choose methods and ways to increase their performance for their sport. Murray states that athletes do not use drugs because they like them, but because they feel compelled to. Rather than merely punishing those caught in the social trap, why not focus on the system? A good enforcement mechanism should be both ethical and efficient. To be ethical, punishment should come in proportion to culpability and should fall on all the guilty parties, not merely the athletes. Coaches, national federations, and political bodies that encourage or fail to strenuously discourage drug use are all guilty. Current policy punishes only the athlete. Instead of punishing just the athlete for the offense and deciding whether or not to punish everyone else involved, we should just take off the performance-enhancing drug restriction and allow everyone involved in the professional sports leagues to come up with safer ways to use those banned drugs.